You know how often Stefan will be like, I'm going to talk at you right now and I know you don't care. And he says that and my brain instantly turns off. I'm like,
well,
okay,
he gave
I don't have to listen.
Yeah, that is true.
He's really just saying, allow me to do this.
To think out loud by myself.
Right.
Good for me.
Yeah. Way to advocate for yourself.
Do you wait for her to say, okay?
Absolutely
no.
not. No. He just starts talking.
I'm Anna.
I'm Darcy.
And I'm Leanne, and we're here to discuss court cases because they teach us how to effectively run special education.
And I'm Stefan. I work in general education, and I'm here to get sped-splained to.
Okay, I have a story. So second grader, 7-year-old, it has ADHD. So he qualifies under OHI. Stefan, do you remember what OHI is? Other health impairment. It's the same one as our last case.
Nobody used the acronym last time. No one said OHI. They said other health impairment. Had you said other health impairment, I'd be like,
in the SPED world, nobody would say other health impairment. They would say OHI. So he is qualified for specially designed instruction, and reading, social emotional behavior was listed as one section, and occupational therapy. Also had a behavior plan in place, which noted, which I thought was interesting, on days he doesn't have medication, he engaged in aggressive and disruptive behaviors. And it listed them out, but I don't think those are that important. One of the things on his IEP was also with a bus monitor because he had struggled with that unsafe behavior on the bus in the past. And he was living with grandma out of district bounds based on McKinney-Vento.
McKinney-Vento's poverty.
Homelessness. So those in like transitional, doesn't necessarily have to be homeless, right? Can be transitional housing, can stay at their home school even if they are currently living out of district bounds.
Yes.
So during a snowstorm, are we saying the years? Did we say the year?
No.
Years? I didn't. Okay, so during a snowstorm, the district canceled all out-of-district transportation, so they weren't going to go get him. So grandma brought him to school, but he was supposed to ride the bus home after school. At the end of the day, no bus showed up at the school to take him, and the case doesn't really explain why. It just says for an unknown reason there was no bus. So the school principal had to figure it out. And they found a bus. It didn't come to the school to get him until 5:15 p.m. So he was hanging out at school for a while after school was done. There was no monitor on the bus. There was just a kid and the bus driver. And the bus driver didn't know this kid, didn't know he was on an IEP or any of his needs. It was a 35-minute drive home. So it was reported that initially the kid sat in the seat, but then became pretty restless. He got up several times, moved around the bus, began interacting with the driver, hugged the driver, kissed her, made other physical contact despite her request for him to stop, was fidgety, kicking, switching seats, those types of things. They assumed that because it was so late in the evening, his medication had worn off by the time it was time for him to be home. So the district placed the kid on emergency expulsion for what they called sexual misconduct on the bus. And then they held a manifestation determination meeting. So Stefan, what do you know about manifestation determination?
I think is it always manifestation determination meeting? Not just manifestation meeting? Are those two separate things?
No, those are the same.
Okay. I've only ever heard it referred to as a manifestation meeting.
It's actually a manifestation determination review, M.D.R. but manifestation is what we would call
Okay,
it.
Steph, what do you know about manifestation determination reviews? Less than I thought, apparently. Manifestation meetings are when a student on an IEP or 504 has been disciplined in some way, shape, or form. Expulsion, suspension, emergency expulsion. Does it always have to be one of those?
Not necessarily.
Okay. I think it's a meeting that is meant to determine whether or not the behavior was a manifestation of the disability.
Yes,
Wow.
that's a pretty good summary.
Are you sure you haven't been explained
He's
before?
pretty-
Oh yeah, no, I've got some background.
It's like, how many manifestations have you been to in middle school?
Is that right?
For the most part, yeah.
And what does it do?
Am I the Andy? I'm the only one talking. You guys are talking.
I'm trying to talk. I'm trying to add. And
That's right, though. That's literally all I know about them, though. Like I have never actually been to a manifestation meeting. I only know them because they come up in your work a lot, and so you talk about it.
I feel like then, as a teacher, you just weren't invited because you definitely had kids hit manifestation, like 1,000,000%.
So you trigger a manifestation determination review and M.D.R. when you've been out for 10 days. Doesn't have to be consecutive. It can be throughout the year.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Type of behavior.
You kind of hit this threshold.
Right.
Well, it doesn't have to be 10 days of removal for that behavior. It can be 10 days of removal for any.
or a pattern.
Yes.
Or,
I mean, not all of them are going to be tied to the same behavior. Mm-hmm. But there's two big questions that you ask at a manifestation meeting. Do you know what those are?
I have no idea. Was this expulsion or this time out due to the student's disability?
That is absolutely number one, yeah. Or one of them.
Again, it's literally all I know about it. So,
Was the behavior caused by the student's disability?
okay.
And then the second one is, was it a failure of the district to implement the IEP correctly?
Oh, that's very interesting based off of what Anna just shared.
why?
Right.
Why do you think that?
Because I stopped taking notes so I could listen. So this might get a little redundant. 7-year-old ADHD, other health, classified under other health impairment. There's some extenuating circumstances where some things it seems like you said for whatever reason there wasn't a bus in the afternoon, but they canceled out of district transportation. This kid they've met all of his qualifications, even though he lives out of district. He still gets transportation from the school, and so there's some extenuating circumstances in terms of different bus driver. They didn't follow things in his IEP, like you said. He's supposed to have a bus monitor on there. Well, you said you have a behavior plan in place when he's not on medication.
Well, the behavior plan would be in place all the time. It just made note of that's one of the contributing factors to behavior.
Mitigating measures is usually what they call.
Because I thought they had literally written a behavior plan for only times when he didn't have his medication, which I thought seemed insane. You can't do that.
Correct.
Right.
And whether or not the student has medications, it would be best practice to have those things in place for that child.
Kind of what I was thinking, right? Like that was just residual trauma from the district. Be like, oh, he's not on his medication today. Like, that's not the time. All right.
So why are they having the manifest?
So he, because they emergency expelled him
Indefinitely.
Correct, for this misconduct on the bus.
So the first thing they have to do is actually change that emergency expulsion, which I think that's old language now.
I think it's
now.
Long-term?
Exclusion. Emergency. I don't remember. Anyways, the EE part, they have to change that to a disciplinary action. So did they change it?
They did. So one of the other things with the manifestation is you have to have that meeting within those 10 days, and they had it after 10 days. So it was already past their.
So they left him on an EE for 10 days, longer than 10 days, 13 days, and hadn't converted it to a discipline?
Darcy's about to.
I mean, there were lots.
Feel about it.
There were lots of mistakes.
So they had the manifestation meeting on day 13. In the meeting, they determined that the conduct was not a manifestation of the student's disability, saying, and this is a quote, sexual misconduct is not a diagnostic feature of ADHD, and that it was not caused by the district's failure to implement the IEP.
How did they find that if the kid didn't have a bus monitor?
I think that's a really good question.
I think the fact that they were so late and didn't even communicate any of these busing changes.
I also wondered, and this wasn't in there, if he has special transportation on his IEP and they didn't transport in the morning, isn't that a problem too?
No, because they didn't transport anybody who was out of district. So because they applied the BEA, it shall happen to all, then it can happen to special ed. If they said we're only going to cancel the special ed route because of the snowstorm, then you'd have a problem.
Okay.
But I don't think they have a problem there.
Okay. So at this manifestation determination review, they said essentially this wasn't, well, they answered those two questions. We're going to go back to the two questions. The two questions are, was this caused by this disability? They said no, because ADHD doesn't cause sexual misconduct. This is not the same. And then it wasn't a failure of the district. Did they provide reasoning behind that?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, usually
They just said it was the team decision.
And who is the team at the M.D.R.? I'm just going to start saying
that. This doesn't say who was there, but usually the M.D.R. team should be the IEP team.
Okay.
And then somebody to facilitate it, which doesn't necessarily have to be an IEP team member, right? Like a school psych might facilitate the M.D.R.
Yeah. So usually you look at the disability and think about the kids that are eligible under that disability and what would be expected behavior around that disability and what would be unexpected behavior. And forgetting to do something or being impulsive would be expected behavior for ADHD, but not sexual misconduct. Although I feel like sexual misconduct might be a bit of a huge statement for what happened. It was the kissing of the bus driver.
Kissing, and then he was like making humping motions towards her.
Oh, I feel like you left that out.
Yeah,
that's really tipped the scale for me. That tips the scale.
Really? Not like on her, like back in the seat was doing that. I think the kissing to me is more
because it's a physical.
Yeah, there's the physical contact to me is more.
But he's also a little kid. I don't know. 7. You kind of think of little kids as huggers and kissers, but you don't think of them as making sexual motions. That starts to go over their age appropriate behavior.
So can we talk about the M.D.R. real quick and what that process might look like? Because I do think I've never actually been at one, and so the whole purpose of that meeting is to answer those two questions and to make a decision based off of that. And the people who make up that meeting are the IEP team and some facilitator. So teachers, case manager, admin, and then family.
Yeah.
Right? Am I missing anybody there?
Student, if appropriate.
He probably wasn't there as a 7-year-old.
Correct.
So I'm wondering and just speculating here who it would have been. Grandma. He lives with grandma.
Yes, but I think parents are also involved.
Okay. I'm just wondering who's advocating for the kid, who's advocating for the parent side in this, because it is actually very interesting to hear Darcy and Leanne say, "Oh, that tipped the scales for me," because as someone who doesn't work with 7-year-olds consistently, and someone who's not in the sped world, like by design all the time, obviously, it's tons of crossover, but it, I don't know, like I think of a 7-year-old kind of bouncing around.
Do you want me to read what it says the behaviors were?
Yes, that would be great.
So bouncing in seat, standing in aisle, hitting the back of the bus seat across the aisle from him, laying down, kicking his feet in the air, stood up, hit the back again, got up out of his seat, thrust his pelvis forward and back near the driver's body in a, quote, humping motion, returned to his seat, and did not touch the driver again during the last 10 minutes of the trip.
And I just think, here's this poor little 7-year-old who got deserted at the school building when everybody else left.
And they did call grandma and asked if she could pick him up, and she couldn't.
Okay.
So that's when they got a bus.
Was he the only one on the bus other than the driver?
Yes.
Okay, so if I'm a parent in that situation, I'm real mad at the district for abandoning my kid at the school. This 7-year-old who's then there for several hours, right? Let's say school gets out at 3:30, so the bus didn't even come until 5:15. He's on the bus for 35 minutes. I'm livid that you then expelled my kid. So if I have all this information, you then emergency removed my kid, and I've waited 2 full weeks, 2 full weeks, so 13 days, right? 13, is that 13 school days or 13 calendar days? So 3 weeks I've waited to have this meeting, and then you're going to say you did nothing wrong, and the fact that it's 5:15 at night, which is way past, and he's had all this extenuating circumstances, that's not a manifestation of his disability. I'm wondering who's on the team there that's going to speak with that justifiable righteous anger that didn't have a voice.
And because it was not found to be a manifestation of the student's disability and it was labeled as sexual misconduct, the expulsion continued.
I have such a hard time with this because it's an impulsive behavior.
So he was expelled for 2.5 months.
And he's 7!
Because on their discipline matrix, sexual misconduct was expulsion.
That makes it sound like it was so intentional and malicious instead of a 7-year-old with ADHD whose medications had worn off.
And this is exactly why legislators have to make ridiculous rules, like you cannot suspend a K through 3rd grader for more than a day. Like, who has to tell someone that? That makes no sense.
I am legitimately mad. So this is a due process, though, right? You didn't just find this manifestation. So
grandma filed.
Yeah,
grandma.
All right. So,
we have to provide services after 10 days, and they violated that too.
They did provide services.
Okay,
after
what
those
does that
10
look
days.
like?
They were doing, I think, 10 hours of tutoring a week.
So special ed did the right thing there. Special ed does not assign discipline. They probably wouldn't have said that was the correct discipline, but we are just the ones to make sure that the student's getting services after those.
But back to Stefan's question, sure, the special ed administrator didn't assign the discipline, but the special ed is at the manifestation table and if it was a team decision, if it was an agreement, saying that they didn't do anything wrong.
I mean, we've all been to those meetings, though, and sometimes there's one special ed,
Does it have to be like a unanimous agreement, or how do those things come to pass? Like, do you raise hands and vote and say should we spend the 7-year-old?
Don't do that.
Right? Yeah, I mean, so is there a power dynamic at play? Like, I'm trying to think. Again, this is my middle school teacher brain, but I'm trying to think of your kids who are on an IEP or a 504 and they're consistently written up, and they're kind of driving the administrator's batty, and not that the administrator has an axe to grind, but do you see what I'm getting at? It's like there's maybe some bias context in there. How is that like ultimate decision made at the team?
At the end of the day, if everybody doesn't agree, the administrator makes the final decision, understanding that it is a legal decision that they're making.
Okay. All right.
It's the school district's job to determine that.
Gotcha. So how'd the court case go?
So the family challenged this, saying that the district violated his rights under our IDEA and that they did fail to provide the bus monitor, which was required in the IEP, and that's what led to the behavior. This also, that came up later, is this exact same situation happened earlier in the school year where he engaged in similar behaviors towards a peer. And in that manifestation meeting, they had determined that not having the monitor was a failure of implementing the IEP. So he did the exact same behaviors, was suspended for 10 days, or emergency expelled, but then they overturned it to a long-term suspension for 10 days, but because they said they didn't implement the IEP. And now they're saying that exact same situation was not a failure of the IEP.
And that came out in the due process.
Yes.
Okay.
The district did not complete a new FBA or reevaluate, but they did do a new IEP and behavior plan, but there was 31 days between the new plans, 31 school days between these new plans and the manifestation meeting. So what do you think the court said, Stefan?
It's weird as someone who's not like innately like pro-establishment that I'm like, I hope the courts lit them up. This is true. Like I'm pro-school and pro-student, and now I'm like, take them out. I think especially because of that previous determination from the team that without a monitor, it was a manifestation of his disability. I think I don't know what an outcome would look like, but I think go.
They didn't just say that it was a manifest of his disability. They agreed that it was not, but that they didn't implement the IEP.
That's what I meant. Sorry, yeah. So it's I guess that's not what I meant. But of those two questions, you have to answer: was this caused by his disability? Yes. Was it a failure of the district? No. Yes. Whatever. You have to answer those two questions correctly in order to rule in favor of the student. So because they didn't properly implement his IEP the first time without the bus monitor, I think because that precedent was set, the court ruled in favor of the family. But I don't know what a potential outcome for that might be. And I think we should guess, since Darcy and Leanne don't know, what could the court potentially rule?
I would say they gave him comp ed for the days he was out.
I mean, I can't think of anything else that they would do.
Because it was a denial of access. But he did get 10 hours, so what that SDI looked like could weigh into that as well.
Right. Was this?
They asked the district to go over the 2 vital questions of M.D.R. and have training on it.
I think we also probably need to do an FBA and a BIP again, probably, when a student's been out that long. I would think that some of that behavior would be captured in the BIP and therefore make it like part of the disability.
And they should have redone it after the first time that happened this year, and they didn't.
Okay.
So they did do a new BIP, but no new FBA.
Functional behavior analysis, assessment, and behavioral implementation, intervention plan. Implementation.
But you don't have to do a new FBA every time.
No, that makes sense. If they had one that was appropriate already.
So an FBA is like the assessment to determine the function of the behaviors, and then from that assessment, you write your behavior intervention plan. So it's helpful if you have new behaviors or if there's been a change in something to do a new FBA to see if there's a new reason why these behaviors are happening. Otherwise, you could be writing your behavior plan for the wrong target. So not if the behaviors are the same, it's not necessarily appropriate to do a new FBA because you already know why it's happening. It's just our interventions aren't necessarily working.
Makes sense. Okay.
And in this situation, it's hard to say your interventions aren't working because they just didn't implement the intervention of having a bus monitor.
Okay.
So parents requested 316 hours of tutoring. The district argued that they had already done the 60 hours of the 10 hours a week for the time that the student was out after the manifestation meeting. And so the court agreed to an additional 63 hours. So it was 123 hours of compensatory services at the end of the day, or of tutoring services.
So did they get the 123 hours outside of the 10 hours? Because technically that was the SDI happening. So did they get 123 hours of comp service?
No, they got 63 hours.
It's kind of like time served. They were like you've
Yeah,
done.
I don't feel great about that. I'm going to say that because I just feel like that district took an opportunity. They were frustrated with the kid. They mislabeled his discipline to exclude him from school. And they're like, the teacher needs a break. And I'm glad that Grandma took that to court.
Well, I also thought
sorry, because I'm on a rant. And school districts, next step, if you're in that situation, get the kid back to school.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's what I thought was interesting is that they didn't just do a bus suspension, which still counts towards your manifestation. Removal of transportation, if it's listed in the IEP, is still counted as manifestation, but that still wouldn't have taken away from the time at school because the issue happened at school. Why would you not just do bus removal?
I just feel like it's so clear when you're listening to it that it happened because of the context, the situation where the medication had worn off and there was no bus aid on there. You would just go, hey, now we know that we definitely need to keep that bus aid on the IEP. That is absolutely required for this child's behavior intervention plan, and never have any discipline around that. But usually it's emotional, right? The bus driver was very upset. There was backlash, maybe, and there's always just so much behind the scenes that you can kind of.
Well, and I mean, not in this case that I want to give the district too much benefit of the doubt, but it doesn't seem like this situation doesn't seem super uncommon, right? When you have, I think, Darcy, that just in my gut feels very right. It feels right on to me. With like, we needed a break if it's a frequent flyer student. Kid obviously has a lot going on, needs a lot of support, but also you said it's a snowstorm that caused a lot of the stuff. And so if you think of that like disillusionment trough, whatever, of schools that teachers go through and school districts go through, it's probably January, February, which is a tough time for a school district anyways. Can't you see people's like kind of being at their wits end and just tired and the days are long and dark and like, you know what? Just not that it made what they did right. I'm just trying to think of what leads you to a place that says, yeah, this 7-year-old should be away from his peers for 2.5 months.
And the learning, like 10 hours a week is not the same thing as 30. How long are kids in school? 35 hours, 30 hours of instruction.
And they're supposed to have access to gen ed peers, which you can't do that in the model that they were serving them.
And as Grandma, I think it'd be really important that this is a kid who obviously needs some really direct instruction on what do I do when I want to kiss or hug someone? What is the alternative? How do I do a high five? Like, I mean, there's got to be something really specific taught around that. And I wonder what happened after that.
Yeah. So that was my other question. It's like, what do you think are next steps in order to support the student? Yeah, direct instruction at home, right? Like this.
Well, not just at home, but at school. Like
well,
that's a school problem.
He's out for 2.5 months. That's the place it's happening.
Right.
But yeah, so let's say this kid comes back. There's been an incident. Let's say it's handled the right way, where they. Actually, no, I'm not going to make that up. I'm going to ask you how should this have gone?
I mean, you have the ability to take a break and examine the situation for a couple of days, right? You could do out of school discipline if it felt really necessary to reevaluate and bring all the team players together again. But that is just too long.
I just really felt like I would want to the next day call and say, man, we messed up on the bus yesterday. I am so sorry. We've got a plan in place. If this happens again, we didn't know transportation meant we're not doing AM or PM. And now we got this little guy here and he was tired and spent all day. And then he did 2 hours sitting in a chair in the office, and the secretary staring at him with the TV on. We've got a plan. We're going to make it right. Why isn't he here today?
I mean, that's absolutely what I want to have happen. But
Well,
too
yeah.
much. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that's an easy one to own. It happens. Like the school didn't even have to eat a ton of crow. Like it was an accident and it happened and there was a big snowstorm. Like it was a natural,
and that's not like you said, teachers are often tired, so they need a break or whatever. This wasn't even his regular bus driver. So okay, that bus driver doesn't have to go to that school again. Like,
which probably the factor, right? Like you've got this bus driver who doesn't know the kid and is like, what the heck is going on? Not a situation they're normally in, whereas this typical bus driver, relationships, right? Like you've got this prolonged relationship with the kid. And so and that's exactly what I was asking is like, how should the district have responded to this? Like own up to that, get the kid back in school. Like I think about when I was in the classroom and someone told me once, it might have been you, Darcy, said like, don't, like the second you send a kid out of your room for discipline, you've lost all of your power, right? Because where did the incident happen? You need to address it where it happened. That way the kid can learn from the experience. You just robbed this kid of doing better next time, learning what appropriate behavior is, learning self-management, that type of stuff.
And I would argue a 7-year-old on or off an IEP does not understand the repercussions of 2.5 months home from school.
I just, as a parent of kids with ADHD, labeling that as a sexual misconduct would really bother me. And I guess they can't change the wording, but I would not even want that in my student's record.
They did, change the discipline to a long-term suspension instead of expulsion on his record. But they did not take off the sexual misconduct that I see.
And another piece too that I think, just from my experience, is this was awesome. He only did it in front of one person. He's not from his entire classroom who now like thinks he's the weird kid, right? Like, yay. It takes small wins.
Yeah. This is awesome. Pause. Where's she going with this?
Did they mention that they also didn't inform the person who drove the bus about the behavior plan and the student's IEP?
They said that she was not aware of his IEP or needs.
So there were just so many mistakes that they could have owned up to, and it's always a good idea to own your mistakes with families right away because they are forgiving of that. As long as you get back to teaching their kid and forgiving the kid too for mistakes.
So Anna, before I tell you what I think I know now, what did you want us to know?
To follow the IEP. Even
I'm in the school, the bus doesn't come. What's your recommendation?
What do you, if there's no bus?
Yeah, like this happens. This happens all the time, right?
And having a bus driver that doesn't know the kid happens. I think somebody still could have gone with the principal, or somebody could have gone with the bus driver, especially someone that knows, that the kid knows, because also how scary for that kid is late. It's dark. It was January. It's hours after school, and I'm driving half an hour home with someone I don't know. Like, I just think about my child would be screaming at that point. Maybe not humping, but screaming, right? Like, behaviors are going to happen. So I think
making sure they had someone, ideally who knew the student, but an additional person.
And truly another like thing to think about is, are you actually taking time to consider what those questions are asking in a manifestation determination meeting? Like, how are you determining if it's a manifest of their disability or not, and truly looking at the IEP, and in this case, behavior plan, and seeing, did we actually follow all of these things or not? And if not, why didn't we? What should we be doing better next time? And if we did, and these behaviors still happened, what do we need to change?
So what I think I know, what I learned first, manifestation determination review, nailed it. M.D.R.s are comprised, are take place. Oh no, this is the part I'm not super confident about. Take place when a student has been out of school on a disciplinary action for a cumulative 10 days, or there's a pattern of removal.
Good job.
The M.D.R. needs to happen within that 10 day. There's like a 10-day window. It has to happen within. And there are two primary questions that drive the meeting. Was the behavior that led to the removal caused by the student's disability? And was there a failure of the district to implement the IEP? The M.D.R. is comprised of the IEP team, which could be teachers, administrators, family, student if appropriate, special education staff, and some kind of facilitator.
And somebody knowledgeable about the disability, which usually is the school psychologist.
And I guess this is the part I'm not clear about. If either one of those questions is answered in a way that says, like, this was either a failure of the district or this was caused by the disability, the kid's right back, right?
Yeah, can I clarify something about that? Those questions are asked actually opposite. Your first question is, did the district follow the IEP or behavior plan? And if the answer is no, you don't ask the second question.
Interesting. Okay. And then, so let's say this is a failure of the district. Kid comes right back, right? Mm-hmm. We failed this kid. We're going to make it right back. If it's not, then apparently we can just long-term suspend, expel a 7-year-old for 2.5 months, and there's no real recourse to that.
They would follow general ed discipline guide.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's a better way to put it than my snarky not suspending a 7th grader. But there was still SDI happening in that time that the student was out, right? So they can still provide.
So if you're removed for more than 10 days, you on an IEP still need to receive services in SDI.
Okay. That's very helpful. I feel like I have a pretty good idea of not the ins and outs, obviously, but having never been to an M.D.R., I feel pretty solid about that. I'm not in the day-to-day of K-12 education at this point, and so sometimes it's easy to forget what teachers go through in the ins and outs, but it was very interesting listening to, what am I trying to say? My real takeaway here is the importance of relationships and knowing students, I think, because that could have solved a whole lot of problems before they even happened, because if someone who knows the student, and I'm not saying they don't love the kid, but someone who knows and has unending passionate love for the student is involved in the situation and rides the bus with them, or teachers go above and beyond all the time, but that relationship really would have solved all this stuff.
Good job, Stefan.
Yeah.